Every time you stream a video or ask an AI a question, it all runs on electricity. And right now, that demand is just exploding. Today, we're going to dig into FirstEnergy, a major U.S. electric company, because their latest performance report pulls back the curtain on a massive transformation that's happening in the energy world, all thanks to our digital habits. So let's dive in. We're kicking things off with a quote right from the top from FirstEnergy CEO. And listen to the word he uses, transformation. He's not just calling this a little trend, he's saying it's a fundamental shift. This isn't just about adding a few more power lines here and there. No, it's about completely rethinking the grid to handle this insane demand from one place in particular, data centers.
And when we say insane demand, we are not kidding. Just look at these numbers. In FirstEnergy's area alone, the power needed just for data centers is expected to leap from around 3,800 megawatts today to over 15,000 in the next 10 years. That is more than a four-fold increase. So the big question is, why is this one company right in the middle of this boom?
Well, you know what they say, location, location, location. FirstEnergy just happens to be in a critical sweet spot of the PJM electrical grid. You can think of the PJM grid as the interstate highway system for electricity in the eastern U.S. It manages the power for 65 million people. So FirstEnergy's lines are like the essential superhighways needed to get massive amounts of power to all these new data centers popping up. And here's the real kicker. This isn't some small niche issue for them. The growth from data centers is so huge that it's projected to increase the entire peak demand on FirstEnergy's system by almost 50%. That's a system-wide challenge and, as we're about to see, a massive opportunity. So how are they even positioned to handle something like this? Okay, so let's take a look at the company's financial health. Because, let's be real, meeting this kind of future demand is going to cost billions and billions of dollars. And you can't even start a project like that unless you have a really strong foundation right now. Before we jump into the numbers, let's just quickly break down a term you're going to see. Core EPS. The easiest way to think about it is like a financial health checkup for a company. It basically measures their real, ongoing profitability by stripping out any weird one-time things, so you get a much clearer picture of how the core business is actually doing. And, well, that picture is looking pretty healthy. In the third quarter, FirstEnergy pulled in core earnings of 83 cents per share, but the really important part here is that 9% growth over last year. That's solid, positive momentum. It shows the company is really on firm footing. And this isn't just some fluke, one-off good quarter. If we zoom out and look at the whole year so far, their core EPS is up an impressive 15%. That shows a really consistent pattern of being disciplined and getting things done, which is exactly what you need to see before they take on a huge build-out of the grid. So, what do you do when you're performing that well? You put that money to work. You reinvest it. FirstEnergy just boosted its investment plan for this year alone by 10%, bringing it to a massive $5.5 billion. This isn't just some number on a page. This is the war chest they're building to tackle that data center boom head on. All right, so they've got the money. What's the actual plan? How exactly are they going to spend all those billions to meet this unbelievable new demand? Well, it really breaks down into a clear two-part strategy. Part one is all about those highways we talked about. If data centers are the giant new cities, then the high-voltage transmission lines are the interstates connecting them. And to handle all that new traffic, all that electricity, FirstEnergy is planning to jack up their investment in these transmission lines by 30%. But having more highways doesn't really help if you don't have enough cars, or in this case, enough power to begin with. And that brings us to part two, actually making more power. Over in West Virginia, the company sees a shortfall coming, so they've laid out a super clear plan. They're proposing to build 1,200 megawatts of new natural gas plants. That's for reliable, on-demand power. And then they'll complement that with 70 megawatts of new solar. The next big step is getting state approval early next year. And the scale of this is just staggering. The initial price tag for just this one power generation project in West Virginia is estimated to be around $2.5 billion. That's a massive, massive undertaking, and it really shows you just how serious this power crunch actually is. Now, all this talk of billions of dollars in spending, it naturally leads to one really big question for all of us, right? What does this mean for my electricity bill? Let's bring this whole story home and see how this actually might affect you. Honestly, this might be the most surprising part of this whole story. You'd think with all this spending, bills would be going through the roof. But if you look at the data, on average, FirstEnergy's residential bills are actually 19% lower than the bills from their competitors in the same states. So even with all this big spending, they're somehow managing to keep costs competitive.
And they're taking some really specific steps to keep it that way. For example, in West Virginia, the average customer's bill actually stayed flat from last year to this year. And, crucially, they're working to make sure that regular folks like you and me aren't footing the bill for this data center boom. They're making these huge new power users sign up for volume commitments to cover their own costs.
So, in the end, we're left with this massive question. We all want the amazing benefits of our connected digital world, but powering that world requires a truly historic investment in our energy grid. The puzzle we all have to solve is, how do we balance this incredible new demand with the absolute need to keep our power on and our bills affordable? That really is the central challenge for our energy future.